Hi, everyone. My name is Annie with Virtualization and Cloud Review, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. The topic of today's webcast is Maximizing Multi-Cloud ROI Through Effective Compliance and Security, presented by OTAVA and TCT. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. We will have a Q&A session at the end of today's event, so please type any questions you may have in the Q&A box. And OTAVA has provided some resources which correspond to today's event, so please take a moment to check those out as well. And today's webcast is being recorded, so keep an eye out for a link in your email to rewatch the presentation or share with a colleague. And now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Today we have the pleasure of hearing from Jason Pullman, Director of Public Cloud Solutions at OTAVA, and Adam Goslin, CEO of Total Compliance Tracking. So we are in for a great event, and with that, I'll pass the time over to Jason to get us started.
Yes, thank you, Annie. Yes, as Annie said, my name is Jason Pullman. I'm Director of Product here at OTAVA. I've been with OTAVA for about 7 years, have a background at EMC, Dell, and then also HP. So I've dealt with very large enterprise infrastructures as well as small SMB shops. So today, we're going to go over quite a few things here, and we'll tell you what we're going to cover and what we're not here in just a minute when we hit the agenda. But I'd like to welcome Mr. Adam Goslin, CEO of TCT, as our guest speaker today. Adam, please tell everybody about yourself.
Great. Thank you, Jason. My name is Adam Goslin. I'm CEO for Total Compliance Tracking. TCT is an organization that specializes in compliance management software that's targeted really at companies that are going through compliance, as well as those organizations that assist compliant organizations. So I call them service providers or assessment and audit firms. TCT has been a longtime client and partner to OTAVA. Really, that started, a relationship that's almost been 2 decades. Initially, I started as a client. I've been done some consulting work with various OTAVA clients. Been running the compliance program over at OTAVA operationally for probably close to about 10 years. I had to step in at a certain point in the game, be an interim CISO for OTAVA, and TCT proper has been leveraging OTAVA as a customer as well for over the last 7 years. We were the inaugural client for OTAVA's Azure Cloud US instance, as well as the inaugural client for the Azure EU instance. So that was a lot. It's been a lot of fun. One, I guess, housekeeping element on my end is that in the resources, there are some links to TCT's blog, which also will give you a link to TCT does a podcast every week called Compliance Unfiltered. So go and check those out as well. Jason.
All right, thank you, Adam. All right, so the agenda today. Now, understanding that Selection Sunday doesn't happen, and so we can't plan this around March Madness. And just so happens we're now competing against some #1 seeds out there. But record, Kansas fans, Howard fans, we just record the game. We're going to make sure we make this entertaining and resourceful, and I guarantee you're going to learn a few things with us today. We got some great educational items coming up, great insight from Adam, so please hang with us. And then you Alabama fans at 2:45, we'll probably be wrapped up by about then. So let's get right to it. We're going to start out with the state of multi-cloud, and then the drivers and challenges. What's going on? Why multi-cloud? And not that anybody doesn't know already, but we're going to just show you some information that we've done from our research. Your security posture. What can you do to improve that posture and reduce your attack services? Very insightful on 3 and 4. And then we're going through a case study with Adam and TCT today. A little bit about OTAVA, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A. So we'll get right to it here. So what is multi-cloud? And the only reason, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but we want to make sure people understand what we're talking about, using the different cloud providers for their best of breed type services. and if you're out in multi-cloud right now, or if you have a certain cloud, you know what they do best. And you probably have an idea of some things they don't do as well, right? So you may look for another provider. It may be to the old adage of don't put all eggs in one basket as well. You got to be careful of doing certain things, because as you spread out applications across multi-clouds, of course, you introduce latency. So what we're going to talk about today on the multi-cloud definition here is more of a, let's use the specific cloud for the best resources they have to offer to deliver our applications to our customers. That's what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit of information here, but I know it's a very busy slide, and on these busy slides, I'm going to take you right to the meat of things. So really what this is doing here, and as you get time, go back through. This is very interesting. There's 5 different sources on this page giving us information. So it's good. It's not just one, those one-offs that are sending out information. We got 5 different researches, documents and papers down at the bottom listed that inform this slide. So if you look at it, I'm going to focus in on the big numbers mainly. So what is the goals front and center for cloud customers, right? It's really scalability and agility. And that's what you're looking for, the agility for business to get out there, maybe some new business units, lines of products, service lines, et cetera. But it's creating that business agility so IT can actually meet the needs of the business. And we all know the goals out there, and you can see it's no surprise that it came up at 75%. Another thing about multi-cloud is freedom or worriness about a vendor lock-in for public clouds. Right? We all have, who do you go with? Google, Android, or Apple? We're all concerned about specific vendor lock-in, but I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, is finding the cloud that's right for your service. We're not going to talk about all the different cloud options. We can do that another day if you like. Just leave your name in the chat, and we can certainly get a hold of you and have that conversation if you like. But also, the last, I'm kind of moving around here, the 40% is, what's our challenge about getting out to? We understand that these different multi-cloud resources are the best of breed. How do I manage that? So as you can see, in no surprise, 40% encountering inadequate resources and skills to be able to develop that. So, not only is there advantages to multi-cloud, there's also some concerns that a lot of customers are running into with the inadequate resources. Now, that kind of leads us in, and as we're going to go through the deck, because not having those resources, sometimes things are skipped. Sometimes there's some gaps that are left untouched that can be damaging, especially when it comes to the security posture. So, Adam, just real quick, any thoughts or notes that what jumps out of you from this research here?
Yeah, if I put on my business owner hat, I'm often wearing several hats, but certainly, scalability, agility, is one arena as a business owner that I'm concerned about. Modernizing the security and compliance stance is often a challenge for organizations. And, certainly the last point that you were bringing up about inadequate, making up for inadequate resources and skills, that's a challenge that just about every business, especially in the security and compliance space, is dealing with today. So I think those hit the mark.
Yeah, very good. Agreed. All right, let me get the next slide queued up here.
All right, I'll jump into the fray on this one. So, having worked with all sorts of companies of different sizes, industries, compliance standards, there's several things that kind of pop out to me here. There's many organizations will really underestimate their ability to do everything themselves. They're used to handling things on their own, and they underestimate the ability for them to take it on. There's many that they don't realize the skills gap between, the personnel that can, make something operational versus the ability to do it in a compliant manner. That's often kind of a gap that I'll see in organizations that I work with in the security and compliance space. There's organizations that don't already organizations certainly that don't already have like a third-party validated stance on security and compliance. They end up drastically underestimating the value of kind of quality security testing and validation as part of their overall program. A lot of them will make a mistake of just choosing the lowest price vendor, put out an RFP or look at a bunch of vendors, pick the one with the lowest price and go, believing they're going to be okay. And it's really not until it's too late that, these organizations will realize their mistake. When their name shows up in lights on Google, the statistic of, close to 70%, of organizations reporting, security misconfigurations leading to data breaches, ought to be a, kind of a startling and concerning arena for organizations as a whole. JP?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well said. And this is where, as we're going to lead you through this deck here, there's an underlying theme, and maybe you guys can post it in the chat what you think it is, and you'll probably get a sense of it in the next few slides. But it's not skills gap. It's we understand the challenges out there with businesses are facing. How can we best help you position yourself to reduce your attack surface, and or find a partner out there that can help you make sure you're not one of these statistics here that we're getting ready to talk about. So underlying theme coming up in the next few slides, and really it starts with planning and a proper framework. Now we're going to talk about the importance of having a strong security posture starts with a framework. Now, if it's a framework, say you're, either got PII or you got a financial institution or whatever the case may be, you got other compliancy regulations that you got to adhere to, let alone worry about ransomware and threat actors out there trying to, either get in through phishing attacks or something else. So understanding the frameworks that are out there is very important to get started on building that plan. And one of them is collectively known as CIA. And I've heard this a lot, and that's why we wanted to bring it back and surface today. It's one of several. So if you look at this, if you start to think about this and apply practices based on a framework such as this, you can start to pick and poke about how you want to be very strategic and tactical about what you're using to make sure you can reduce the risk of your businesses coming to a threat actor. Adam, what's your comments here, your thoughts on frameworks?
Well, at its root, maybe all of the compliance standards, look at their requirements against confidentiality, integrity, availability. But, there's some that are more, I call them high-level directional standards, as an example, HIPAA. It really, kind of has these buckets of objectives, and you're kind of left to your own devices as to, how to go about achieving, the coverage for those particular items. And then there's other more prescriptive standards, such as the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, short form to PCI DSS, which is the standard for handling credit card transactions. There's all sorts of standards out there, standards for educational institutions, government contracting, manufacturing, cryptocurrency. They're endless, but at the end of the day, it's true that they all kind of boil down into these common security principles. So leading into the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about how to achieve a secure and compliant security posture. So to that end, we've got a couple of different arenas when you're looking at multi-cloud. Certainly one of the areas that comes into play is identity and governance. And actually, I apologize. I had to make it a little bigger over above the screen here. But there's different things that you can do to harden up your strategy, identity and governance. So making use of an identity provider that can scale with your business, going kind of across your scope. Certainly putting into play multi-factor for all of your users, and there's some considerations there for each organization. Not only is it your front end users that are making connectivity into secured systems, but also your internal resources and their connections inbound into the environment also need to need to be considered. Certainly access control tiers and policies for applying principles of least privilege across the environment. That's an entire realm or area. It often takes it's complicated for organizations to get in place, get into a framework that that kind of works for the organization, so that you can truly invoke role-based access control to the environment. Connectivity, kind of the next realm. Being able to utilize various private backbone networks where available, and making sure you're encrypting the traffic on them. As many don't natively include encryption. So certainly from the interconnectivity perspective, inbound outbound traffic, making sure that transmissions are secured, as well as external connections inbound, leveraging VPN connections from any public internet locations, so that you can encrypt that traffic in flight is kind of another consideration for organizations. At the edge, certainly next gen firewalls, at each point, making sure that you've got intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems, making sure that both the edge devices as well as your IDS IPS are pushing their alerts into your central logging. DDoS protection, having that in place more and more, especially for SaaS-based providers, is kind of as a critical component. Data loss prevention becomes another consideration for organizations, depending on what types of information and data that they've got. Making sure you have protections in there for the data that you're being entrusted to protect. Is certainly focusing in on the types of traffic that are allowed in, allowed out, so that you can and actually the outbound side of that equation is one where a lot of organizations don't spend enough time getting that buttoned up. It takes a while, and it's fairly complicated to make sure that your environment is only allowing certain outbound traffic. So for organizations, putting a focus in on that arena, is a really good measure, because what you're looking to do is you're wanting to make sure that if you did happen to get a bad threat actor within the environment, now you're limiting the channels, the outbound channels that they have the capability to communicate against. Endpoints, making sure that you're doing posture checking on your endpoints, maintaining patching, versioning requirements, making sure that you've got appropriate AV malware solutions, that those are being kept up to date. Again, that those are piping their information into central logging as well. In addition to, for those that have a mobile workforce, local firewall policies, on the endpoints that for your mobile workforce, so that you've got some protections around the endpoints themselves. Getting into kind of the business continuity and disaster recovery arena, making sure that you've got resiliency with secure backups and point-in-time replication, recovery options to serve your recovery time objective, your recovery point objective requirements of the business. I'm going to stick there for a second. And one of the challenges that I've seen with organizations is making sure that they have good visibility across their engagements and their agreements with their either clients or partners, because there may be all sorts of I'll call it interesting provisions in agreements that may have been inked some time ago. So really going back to those agreements that you've got, with your interested third parties to make sure that you're meeting the requirements that that you believe that you're beholden to. It's surprising how many organizations will struggle with kind of bringing that all together to create a kind of a singular view. And certainly incident response comes into play as well. From a visibility perspective, making sure that you've got, I mentioned it a couple times before, but central logging, making sure that you've got that going to a central location. You've got a pulse on the activity. Certainly with central logging, making sure that you are validating, am I receiving the logs from all of the various points that I expect to be receiving logs from? And one of the areas where I'll see organizations at times struggle is maintaining an alerting system that will alert if I'm not receiving logs from certain of the systems or assets that I've got within the environment. You want to make sure that you've got overview of the performance and availability of your multi-cloud sites, and making sure that you're doing your daily log reviews as well as pushing out alerts. Whew, there, I'm done, JP. What else you got?
There's a lot there, and just some color commentary. What we see here is quite a bit. We've had a lot of customers asking us, help me with my edge has moved. It's disappeared. I go back to the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Who Moved the Edge? What has happened now, the new edge really is with your identity provider. And we have a lot of customers coming to us asking, hey, help me make sure, along with multi-factor, what else can I do? Help me build my conditional access policies. And depending on where we've had one come to us that my human element is just off the page. I need a way to help me find a way to take out the human element in these phishing attacks because I'm getting killed. There are conditional access policies that can help do that, take out the human element. They're not that easy. They're complex and new to a lot of users. However, it's out there, and we're starting to get in that because there's no longer the edge. As you can see in the diagram here, the edge is out there, especially when you got a multi-cloud type of installation, as well as SaaS services out there that may be providing certain pieces of your business. The observability is key. You touched on that, Adam, but being able, when you have a multi-cloud structure, being able to get those logs from each of those clouds into a single pane of glass to make sure you understand what the pulse is going on with each of these clouds. That includes not just, a lot of people just do, okay, just let me have the critical logs. Well, no, you need activity logs. You want to get performance logs. You want to pull all that into a centralized panel to make sure you have that observability. So don't make sure you understand that. And that's part of your plan when you start your multi-cloud strategy, is the way to make sure you have your pulse on what's going on with each of your cloud instances. GLP, you mentioned.
JP?
Oh, go ahead. Sure.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to jump in with one thing, which you triggered me on. Is the notion of that kind of amalgamation of the logs across your multi-cloud environment. That's huge because more and more the threat actors they're getting crafty. They're not going to go in and just hit an organization and from one direction, but they're going to hit you here and here and here. And it's really important to be able to see that pane of glass you were referring to, so you can tell who's doing what, what are they trying? Oh, they're trying this over here. Now they're trying that over here. That's huge, especially when you're trying to kind of thwart a threat actor. That's a big deal.
Yep. Right here, and it probably should be blown up a little bit more because this is becoming, of course, remote workforce, but bring your own devices. And Adam mentioned posture checking. We get a lot of customers asking us to help them make sure that they're bringing in a version control, making sure the device has certain patches, whatever the case may be, but putting that on the front end before they authenticate into the environment that we're doing that posture checking. And really, you touched on it again in incident response plan. You got to have that. And we've worked with, especially folks in the OTAVA cloud, we work to develop, because that incident response plan is not just your business. It's also your third-party cloud providers too. And that's where OTAVA brings a lot of value. And I know I'm getting ahead of the OTAVA slides here, but just keep in mind that IRT plan should involve your providers as well. If you're lucky enough to have a provider like OTAVA and jump into those IRT plans and maybe exercises that you would be doing. And I say exercises because it's great you have a plan, but how many times have you tested that plan? And that goes back to the old adage of backups, your resiliency plans, et cetera, right? But also tabletop exercises for your incident recovery plans or incident response plans as well. So, and one thing that, I pulled from some of your collateral over the years is that, factors that reduce breach impact. That incident response or incident response plan and training can reduce that impact by 45%. Have you seen that number getting better over the years, or is it starting just staying stagnant, or what are you seeing?
Well, I mean, what I'm seeing in the industry is I'm certainly seeing, because got to remember, I stepped into this space close to 2 decades ago. It was a mess in the beginning. As the years have gone by, I've seen general improvement. Certainly, the notion of organizations out in the marketplace has been consistently improving. They've been consistently, whether they did it electively, which is the hope, or they're kind of forced to because of relationships they've built with a big client or a big partner, et cetera, all the way around, visibility, oversight of security and compliance has been doing nothing but going up. Certainly one of the challenges in the incident response arena is that, for a lot of organizations, they'll do one of two things, generally speaking. They're either going to go and write this, spend years writing this compendium book of every scenario known to man and use very little of it, or they go and pick up this template, which they, go put together with, levels, et cetera, and then they go and put it on the shelf. And the one piece of advice that I would give to organizations is there's a middle ground between the off-the-shelf template and the 2,000-page compendium, certainly. And secondly is please do not be afraid to invoke your incident response. A lot of organizations will look at it as, oh, well, it's a bad thing if we had an incident. And, I sit side by side with dozens of different assessors on security and compliance engagements. It actually makes them feel better if the organization isn't afraid to declare an incident. Keeping in mind an incident could be everything from holy moly at this end to, hey, we got to go and do an investigation, right? Both of those are incidents, but organizations seem reticent to declare them. And I would encourage the exact opposite, because it's a lot better to exercise it, certainly test it with your various providers like OTAVA, et cetera. That way everybody's in lockstep, and you get an opportunity to go in and get a real-world exercising of your incident response and disaster recovery business continuity. It's not a bad thing.
I'm going to add one thing to that before I move on to the next slide. And you know this, and one thing that we do offer is the ability to have those plans out in a secure storage location. We offer all of our customers a small little area where they can upload all their run books and recovery plans, just in case it's on somebody's desk when an emergency happens. That has happened, and or that plan is on the set of servers or compute devices that have failed or went down or were compromised. So we offer the ability to store those plans with us, so everybody's on the same page, and two, those are readily available to all parties when needed. So just something to think about there. I'm going to jump to the next slide. And the next slide we kind of talk about the posture from a security standpoint for multi-cloud environments, but then also for you folks out there and many of our customers, there's also another layer of regulatory practices that have to be considered. Now, Adam, you've been doing this for years. You've run audits. You've been involved in audits. So walk us through here what you've seen and what's helpful to understand and be focused on, especially when you're developing your plan for a multi-cloud strategy.
Well, certainly at OTAVA, I want to really start there. The reality is that you've got a kind of a compendium of different certifications for the organization itself. There's a lot of organizations out there that are kind of dependent on their hosting provider. In the case of OTAVA, you've got HIPAA, PCI, SOC 123, ISO 27001, and HITRUST. All within that arena. I know we're going to talk about kind of the TCT case study in a minute. We'll get into a couple other things. But certainly for the organizations which are kind of trying to figure out what is it that we need to leverage and do. One of the things is certainly you've got choices right around how do you want to go about putting together your strategy for your compliance in the cloud. One of the big misnomers that I've seen and I wanted to bring up is I can't tell you how many different companies I've seen. They'll make a statement that, oh, well, my hosting provider is compliant, so we're good, And unfortunately, it's just not that easy. With any given certification for an organization, there's responsibilities that certainly they can hand off to their vendor. So in the case of with hosting, things like physical security in a multi-cloud style environment, the vendor that's provisioning the cloud infrastructure is going to be responsible directly for things like physical security of the data centers. But there's other elements like your policies, security awareness training of your own personnel. And then there's other, those are really responsibility of the organization themselves. But then there's also things like shared responsibilities. So, I'll give you a couple of different examples. When, you're making valid access requests, is one realm where there's shared responsibility. So, the organization will make the access request. The provider will, provision access. The organization then will, go in and validate that, that it's set up working and functional. Things like making requests for firewall modifications. If you've got a provider that's offering up managed firewall capability, then put in the ticket for the firewall request. The provider will then go ahead and make the firewall modifications, and then you go in and do the double check and validation. So in those cases where and there's a lot more examples of that kind of shared responsibility. You've got those instances, and the real key is for the organization that is kind of attempting to put together their framework for how am I going to go approach this. It's key for them to understand, exactly which of the items against their compendium list are items that are sole responsibility of their organization, which ones are shared with their vendor and how, versus which of those elements are items that they can kind of put off to the vendor. Certainly there is there's a lot of elements where you will be able to go ahead and leverage, things like in OTAVA's case, the OTAVA, PCI AOC or SOC reports or ISO report or ISO certification to be able to check boxes on your end, but making sure that you really clearly understand that difference, between the various responsibilities is a huge element as you step into the multi-cloud arena. JP, did you have any additional commentary before we move on?
Yeah, I do. And we'll get into some more of this too later on in the deck here. We do have some slides about OTAVA and our specialties, and these are certainly one of them, a secure, compliant cloud offering. How we do it in a multi-cloud environment for our customers that we help is blueprints, security blueprints that we apply to each model. Now, that's part of your plan that you need to get together and work on. And your strategy is to make sure you have those blueprints, because they even though individual services are named differently in the multi-clouds, they're doing the same output. So the same target as what you need them to do. So even though they're named differently, you can still apply a security blueprint across your multi-cloud environment. So make sure you understand that is something you can use at a high level. You may have to individualize it or personalize it for each cloud you're in. However, what we see is 95% once you get that blueprint on paper and outlined and approved by the business, that once you apply it to your cloud providers, that template can be used and reused. Secondly, something, Adam, that you said is that understanding what the flow down terms are from each of your cloud providers and making sure that's a part, because they may have specific language about breach notifications that you need to be aware of, and that needs to be part of your plan, especially when it comes to compliances, because your auditor is probably going to ask you about that. Okay, that's great that you have it here for your stuff, but what about cloud 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you might be in? So make sure that's part of your documentation as well. Adam, any last thoughts on this page before I go to the next one?
No, let's keep it moving.
Let's keep it moving. All right.
All right. You gonna kick this one off, JP?
Yes, absolutely. So,
Cool.
Adam's already really teed it up, and but we do have a case study we wanted Adam to talk about today about his specific business needs and what we did to solve those challenges, not only in the U.S. but abroad as well, to create a multi-cloud structure for TCT, and what it solved and helped and how it helped his business, and then not only just for what it did as far as the planning, but also optimization, making sure we're reviewing this to make sure it's as secure as it can be. So Adam, I'll just let you go at this because I know you have a lot to cover here. So take it away.
Sure, no problem at all. So I'll give a little bit of an overview of TCT. So we talked about this in the beginning. Total compliance tracking, has a SaaS-based compliance management portal that we built from the ground up. We spent about 3 years designing and building it in advance of it going live. And effectively a system that was built by compliance professionals for compliance professionals. TCT as an organization also does security and compliance consulting across a myriad of standards, as well as some deep dive penetration testing. So when TCT was, we had options. Yeah, we had some history with the OTAVA realm, but I'm a big fan of looking at various options, figuring out, whether which direction do we go from a hosting perspective, and ultimately settled in on, leveraging a private cloud environment from OTAVA as our starting point. So when TCT launched back in 2015, the TCT portal, we did start with the OTAVA VPC, and things worked really well with that setup for many years. And around 2018, we electively subjected TCT to third-party assessment against the full breadth of PCI DSS. We decided to leverage a scope of kind of all sensitive data, rather than trying to seclude it just to card data. And we ended up gaining our certification for PCI in 2019 with the third party, and electively gone through that third party assessment ever since. And around the time of Q3 of 2021, TCT started getting pressure from organizations that were requiring us to be able to gain FedRAMP compliance. At the time, OTAVA didn't have that particular compliance against the VPC arena, but I knew they were contemplating a move into a managed Azure offering. So TCT had several conversations with leadership at OTAVA, and we made a collective decision to head toward having TCT being that first OTAVA client to move into their U.S. Azure managed offering. That move we made at the end of Q1 of 2022. And the funny part is it wasn't 4 months later. TCT was getting a lot of inquiries from European organizations. Hey, we'd like to go ahead and have an instance over in Europe, where we have sensitivity to where we, go ahead and, manage our data out of and where it's stored, type of thing. So we'd really like to have a European instance as well. And so what did I do? I went back to OTAVA again, and I said, hey, how'd you guys like to go ahead and, and help me out with swinging up an Azure Europe instance as well? So OTAVA, sure enough, stepped up to the plate, and TCT was again able to be the kind of the first OTAVA client to move into the Europe Azure managed offering for OTAVA. So having already been down the path of the U.S. instance, the second run to EU is actually a breeze. And at this point in the game, TCT is now fully hosted, both in U.S. and EU, in the OTAVA managed Azure offering, which has really worked very, very well for TCT. We've got an international client base, and that just kind of allowed us to be able to maintain a global reach for the various organizations that depend on TCT to be able to serve their needs. One really important element to keep in mind is, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the most distinguishing factors, of OTAVA from a client perspective, and that is being able to go to a single organization and not only be able to put up the hosting, but also then to be able to bring in a full compendium of capabilities for all of the supporting, kind of security and compliance technical aspects. So, things like antivirus, central logging, file integrity monitoring, IDS, IPS, WAF, and more. When you're dealing directly, one of the challenges, I've seen this in the consideration that I put into TCT, but also I've seen it through the lens of managing and helping manage, other organizations get through, their security hoops and hurdles. One of the big problems when you deal with, I call them the big box cloud vendors, is, sure, you can go sign up with them, and maybe they've got this list of vendors that they can go direct you to, but they kind of point you at the list of the vendors and wish you luck. The real difference was the fact that, OTAVA helped, assisted, and consolidated all of those various technical solutions into kind of one interchange, one relationship, and whatnot. It makes, from our perspective, it certainly has made our world a whole heck of a lot easier, better, more efficient, and streamlined to be able to have somebody like OTAVA assisting with, putting those various solutions in place. And quite frankly, that suite of services, we've been leveraging since we started, heading down the having to prove out our compliance to third parties. We've been able to leverage all of those various technical solutions and bolt them straight into our security and compliance posture, not only with the assessors that we deal with, but also as we're going through as an organization. I mean, if you think about it, TCT has literally dozens of assessment firms that we interact with on actively, as well as thousands of organizations on the TCT portal. I've got a lot of people that come to us asking us questions around our security and compliance stance, and certainly the help that we've gotten through OTAVA with kind of putting together a good suite of technical services makes our job a heck of a lot easier when it comes to turning around and filling out those kind of vendor security surveys and going through the hoops and the hurdles of proving out, that we actually have our act together from a security and compliance perspective. It's just, from my perspective, it's worked out fantastic.
That's great to hear, and thank you. And folks in the audience, that's what we wanted. We wanted you to get a customer perspective as well, because you're living through some of the similar challenges, and I've been in there in my previous experiences. Been on that side where it's always nice to have that one vendor that you have a back to pat in many cases, or a throat to choke in many cases. But the thing is, you're in it together, and Adam, thank you for all that and that all the kind words as well. So I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide here. What we're going to do is you're going to see a transition here, but still the underlying theme. But 95, according to VMware here, 95% of organizations agree that multi-cloud architectures are now critical to business success. And you think about that, and it can be not just, oh, okay, I got my cloud, I got my tier one data out here, I got my data warehouse out another place. It's not that. When you think of the 95% of organizations, really you have a lot of SaaS applications in there as well. So if you're a sales organization using Salesforce, and other things like that. So please bear in mind when you say this, like, well, no, we don't agree to that. But think about, you may already be doing it and not realizing it, that you're already in multi-clouds quite a bit. It could be a CRM, it could be the ERP, it could be who knows out there, name one, right? There's so many. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. But Adam, did you have any comments here before I move on?
Just at a high level, I mean, the more and more organizations are going to step into this arena. Certainly one of the things that TCT has been focused on is being able to serve clients globally. So being able to accomplish that through multi-cloud, certainly allows that capability. But the other element of consideration for a lot of organizations is being able to spread their risk through multi-cloud. Even the big players out there have had moments where they've run into challenges. So are you better served from a high availability perspective to kind of spread your load out over several cloud instances and maybe different implementation types? Probably.
Yep, agreed. All right. So how can we help? And I'll get us through the next couple of slides. We only have a few left, and then we'll get to Q&A. But it's really about utilizing our partner. Now, we kind of saw it on the previous slide. We're a VMware cloud, so the VMware platform, we can run it on Azure, we can run it on AWS, depending on what your needs are of the organization. But that creates some real scalability and agility with being able to do this, move workloads around in a lot of cases, and or use the platform, like we mentioned earlier, for its best of breed technology. OTAVA has done this before for several customers. It's really getting in there, and it's all about making sure you're planning accordingly to the best practices of the cloud that you're in, either through an adoption framework of some sort that follows pillars of best practice that you want to follow, all the way to implementation and supporting. We mentioned several times about OTAVA having management capabilities across public cloud environments. So that's why OTAVA there is in the middle, so you can understand that how we can play and how we offer this service to our customers, to be that stop shop to do multi-cloud management for your organizations. Adam, any commentary on this slide before we move on?
Certainly one thing I'd throw into the mix is that from the perspective of a client, and really, seeing other organizations go through this, I've seen organizations, and I know PCT has seen it as well. Running into issues with being able to manage their billing, in these environments. Certainly the billing at each of these individual, facilities for hosting, it can be amazingly complicated. So, certainly from a customer perspective, it makes it so much easier when I can basically, just call up whoever over at OTAVA and say, hey, can you make sense of this, and just kind of look at the basket type of thing. It's nice being able to leverage that, as well as the advantage of the integrated security frameworks across your cloud platforms is another arena that's certainly helpful.
Yeah, I mentioned blueprints earlier. That's because we'll develop them, and we do have developments already for these three big players that we lay the foundational groundwork for workloads out in the clouds. Adam, that's a great point about billing, because you can only do so much with the cost calculators. I think everybody knows that's going out there to use those, and then you get your first invoice. You think, okay, I remember the cost calculator had this item, but I have 4 items for that one individual thing. Why is that? It's very helpful to have that one back to pad to go to call about the invoice and say, hey, can you help me understand this? Because there's a lot of nuances with each of these cloud providers and their bill structures. If you're out there already, you know exactly what we're talking about. So I'm not going to spend a lot of this and go into the individual things that we do at OTAVA, but please look through this when you do get time in between basketball games or whatever have you. And we're going to have some contact information here at the end. Welcome to answer or jump on a phone call with you guys to answer any questions we might be able to. All right. Next slide. We have just a couple left here. How we can assist. And so, yes, if you guessed it, and I don't know how many people have, but it really starts with the planning. You need to have that plan to make sure that, one, you're securing your environment, like I said, blueprints across each of your cloud structures. Making sure your incident response plan has the necessary cloud structures in play, and knowing what those SLAs are. And if you're fortunate enough to have a provider that can be part of that incident response plan, even better. So planning and assessing the environments. We have also ProServe and managed services for each of these stages through your journey. Not just, I mentioned it before, not just planning, but implementation and then operation of the environment. And not just the operation of one and done that we're sitting here waiting for things to happen. It's a continuous optimization that we're checking. Because when we send out the invoices to our customers, it goes through our system and says, hey, something's off here or not right or experiences growth, and it flags us right away to go in and take a look, see what's going on. Because there still could be some rogue IT going on out there that you're not aware of that's going to jump your bill up and up and up, as you guys are probably seeing out there in the public cloud space. So, Adam, just a minute real quick. Anything you wanted to add here?
Absolutely. As a customer, I've experienced the kind of assistance of OTAVA trying to help us go from the VPC up and into the, Azure managed instance. And, I got to tell you, I was legitimately seriously impressed with the process and expertise of the OTAVA team while we were working together to plan that transition. I mean, if you think about it, we were navigating from VPC over into a net new US managed Azure instance and trying to do it together. It was great being able to partner with the crew. Certainly, once we then turned around and went to EU, like I said earlier, it was really smooth. The smoothness, capability, professionalism of the OTAVA team just meant that I, as a customer, had access to these experts that could assist with us making this migration from one point to another. It was just awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much again. Appreciate that. All right, so we talked a lot of things about multi-cloud management, planning, assessing, our ProServe manage. We also have a full array, so please go out to otava.com and take a look at what we do. We have our own multi-cloud infrastructure, of course, resiliency strategies and products available, endpoint management, security products, security as a service, SOCSEAM, everything you can think of. We've really added to our product portfolio over the couple of years. So if you haven't seen OTAVA in a few years, now's the time to come back and take a good hard look. Like I mentioned, we're going to have our contact information up here on the slide following this one, but just an approach, and Adam's kind of touched on this, is really it's a human approach, and it's being available. It's having those escalation paths. It's being able to bounce questions off, because we've been in the business for since the mid 90s. So a lot of experience here with a lot of brain power that has probably seen one or two things that you're probably going through right now that we can assist with. So we'd like to understand the problem, plan it together, implement, address it together, and grow together. So that is really our focus. So that brings us with, not too far off on timing, really, to our last slide of the day is really Q&A and our contact information. So Annie, I'll hand it back to you for get us through any questions, and then and we can wrap this thing up.
Yeah, great presentation, you both. We did get some questions from the audience, and just a reminder, you guys can still throw in those questions on the console right now, and we will try to get to it by the top of the hour. Anyways, here's the first question for you. What is the number one tip that will set me up for multi-cloud success?
I don't know if I've talked about it enough here, but that's really the planning, sitting down and making sure you're taking everything into account, building the plan, documenting, diagramming, and getting buy-in across the business to make sure you have all the concerns of each of your business units in there. And then, of course, if you're under any compliances, to make sure you have regulations practices, you make sure you have that covered as well. And so it all goes back to planning. Adam, I know you have, from your perspective, have quite a bit of detail there when you were considering, what to look for. So why don't you share some of those things with us?
Yeah, I mean, and I talked about many of these things earlier, right? The number one tip, I like that we got one tip, but planning, okay, cool, that works, because there's a lot of legwork that goes into making these modifications. We talked about making sure that you've got your arms around your organizational requirements. What are you legally obligated to? What are your needs and requirements from an industry perspective, mapping all of that together into your decision for direction when it comes to multi-cloud. And I can't underscore enough that there is a gigantic difference between getting a big box hosting vendor and getting a multi-cloud, hosting partner. Which is really where OTAVA shines, kind of over the others in the space. It's a huge frickin' difference.
Yeah. And to bring it this answer full circle to really why we're here today, it's really, I mentioned several times, is having that security blueprint, that template that you can use across all your cloud structures will serve you dividends later on. Annie, any other questions?
Yeah, we do have some other ones. Next one I got to you is, what's the difference between OTAVA and a public cloud provider in terms of service delivery?
Yeah, and good, a great question. So I kind of touched on it on the last screen, and that really is people focused. Like I said, we've been in business for over 20 years, and it's really addressing the problem, addressing the issue, not trying to sell our customers, well, you said this, but you probably need to have this, and this. No, it's really getting to the root of the problem and addressing a strategy, creating a plan, implementing that plan, and delivering that plan. And not only just that, but if you look at our customer base, our customers have been with us for years and years. So it's really providing that people aspect of our service that I think makes us difference, and then what people should look for when they're looking for a CSP. Now, Adam, you kind of touched on the last question. Any other comments you would have?
Yeah, just bring it back to the earlier comments, which the big difference between the public cloud provider and OTAVA is that from the public cloud provider, I'm going to get a list of vendors that they're going to wish me luck. With OTAVA, I can take those technical solutions, sign up for them, have them implemented in a streamlined fashion, and still have, as you like to say, one back to Pat. But I've got that all consolidated into one spot that I can trust to help me through the process instead of just pointing me in the direction of a list. It's huge.
Yeah, great answer, great question. Annie, any more?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. Okay. What is a good security framework to leverage for securing my business and improving our security posture?
Yeah, we mentioned one, but there's many frameworks. And depending on your organization and your market vertical, there may be specifics. And there may be one you want to go out there and look at NIST. But they have their own framework, very comprehensive framework, I might add. Adam, you mentioned a couple as well, but what really surfaces for you as a template form and what framework have you found that you encounter most? And I know it's hard to say which one's best, but what have you encountered the most?
Yeah. Well, and really, I mean, I talked about it a little bit earlier, and PCI DSS is a framework. Yes, it's directed at the credit card industry, but the difference is it's very specific. HIPAA is general, so the PCI DSS honestly would be my de facto because it maps so cleanly because the controls are prescriptive. I can map that cleanly to secondary certifications. There's others out there, the NIST CSF, ISO 27001, are others that are more prescriptive than the general ones, not quite as prescriptive as PCI. But certainly it depends on the organization itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. With the 12 technical requirements of PCI and how prescriptive it is, very thorough and comprehensive. So Annie, that brings us up to 3:00. I'm not sure we have any time for any other questions. So do you want to bring us home?
Yeah, if you guys have any closing remarks, please take the time right now to do that. I know you mentioned we do have a March Madness to get to. So, if you have any closing remarks, then we can close this out. You have our names and our contact information right here. You have some collateral that's available to you as well. Take advantage of that. And any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out or give us a call. Happy to sit down and just have a chat about what's on your mind, what's on your plate, and maybe how we can assist. Everybody have a good day.
The only other thing I'd add.
Oh, go ahead.
The only other thing I'd add to the list is that thanks everybody for joining us for today. And certainly I'd echo what Jason said. If there are any additional questions, don't be shy. We're both happy to help, happy to answer questions. If you can't tell, give direct answers. We'd love the interaction, and thank you very much for joining us today.
All right.
Thank you, great. Thank you, Jason and Adam, for being with us today, and thank you to the audience for attending today's webcast. You guys should be getting the email within the next 24 hours with the recording of this webcast, and have a great rest of your day.